the Environmental Quality Board. I am Margaret Anderson Kelleher. I am not a stranger to the board, but I am in a new role today, and that is as chair of the EQB as appointed by the governor. I thank Governor Walz for that appointment, and I want to thank the staff at the EQB for working with me to bring me up to speed in some areas that will be necessary going forward. I have deep respect for the Environmental Quality Board from my time back as a legislative staffer, as well as the period of time that I was a legislator. And so I really appreciate all the work that has been done by this board. And I also look forward to serving with my fellow board members, as well as making sure that we have a productive time ahead. So a brief greeting. Thank you so much. I'm going to start the meeting with a roll call. Grace Arnold, Commissioner of the Department of Commerce, and I believe that Commissioner Arnold has a proxy today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Anderson Kelleher. This is Aditya Ranade, Deputy Commissioner for Energy Resources at Commerce, standing in for Commissioner Arnold.
Thank you. Kristen Eide Tollefson, Public Member, Congressional District 2. We'll come back. Alan Forsberg, Public Member, Congressional District 1.
Yes, good afternoon.
Julie Gehring, Public Member, Congressional District 7.
Good afternoon. I am here today.
Thank you. Steve Grove, Commissioner, Department of Employment and Economic Development. Or he may have a proxy for the first part of the meeting. I think he will be joining us at some point in the meeting. Jan Malcolm, Commissioner of Health. And I believe that Commissioner Malcolm will be joining us around 3 p.m. But before that, Dan Huff, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Health, will be standing in. Is that correct, Dan? Okay. Nick Martin, Public Member, Congressional District 4.
He's going to be running a little late today, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Brian Murdoch, Public Member, Congressional District 8. All right. Mehmet Koner Steenberg, and I think Congressional District 5, but I'm not absolutely certain of that.
Madam Chair, that's correct. Congressional District 5.
Excellent. Tom Peterson, Commissioner, Department of Agriculture.
I'm here, present.
Alice Roberts Davis, Commissioner, Department of Administration. She might be late as well, right?
That's correct. She'll be joining a little late.
Okay. Sarah Stroman, Commissioner of Department of Natural Resources. I'm pretty sure I saw her on the line. I'm going to give her a moment. Okay, we will come back to her. Peter Tester.
Hello.
I will say this. I know it's temporary, but acting commissioner of PCA?
Temporary.
Temporary.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Gerald Van Amberg, Vice Chair of the EQB and Chair of the Board of Water and Soil Resources.
Present and good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Benjamin Yawaki, Public Member, Congressional District 3.
Present. I'm here.
Thank you, Benjamin. I'm just going to go back and see if anyone else has joined us.
Commissioner Roberts Davis is here. I'm sorry, I'm tardy.
It's okay, no problem.
Kristen Eide Tollefson, District 2, joining you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I got a note that Commissioner Stroman is on the line. She's just having some technical difficulties at the moment.
Okay, we're going to count her present. Anyone else, any other board members join us in the last few minutes here? Otherwise, I'm going to close roll call, and when others come in, that's terrific. We have 10 members of the board present. That is a quorum, so we can take action of the board. So the next agenda item is actually the approval of the consent agenda. So the consent agenda, meaning that there should not be amendments to that agenda, are the meeting minutes from April 21st, 2021, EQB, that's page 4 in your packet, and then the proposed agenda for September 15th, today, 2021. And if I could have a member who was at the board meeting on April 21st, move the consent agenda by oral motion, that would be helpful.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Gerald Van Amberg moves the consent agenda. A second.
Al Forsberg.
Al Forsberg seconds the motion. I don't think there's any discussion to this motion, but I'll just pause for a second. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, and what I think we have to call it as a roll call. Is that correct, Katie?
I was trying to find my mute button there. Yeah, we can call it by roll call.
I think that's the proper direction to go. So could someone else help me with the roll on the vote then?
Yeah, yes, I can. If you can just give me a moment here to pull that up.
I have it up if that's helpful. This is Faith.
Yeah, Faith, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll, I'm helping commissioners who are having technical difficulties, so that would be great if you're able to do that.
Absolutely. Margaret Anderson Kelleher.
Aye.
Grace Arnold, although can the proxy vote in this case?
Proxy cannot vote.
Okay. Kristen Eide Tollefson.
Aye.
Alan Forsberg.
Aye.
Julie Gehring.
Aye.
Mehmet Konar Steenberg.
Aye.
Tom Peterson.
Aye.
Alice Roberts Davis. I'll come back to you. Sarah Stroman. All right, we'll come back to you too. Peter Tester.
Aye.
Gerald Van Amberg.
Aye.
Steve Grove. Jan Malcolm. Nick Martin. Brian Murdoch. Last ones are not. Okay, going back to Alice Roberts Davis. Sarah Stroman. Aye. All right, we're at 8 aye votes. Oh, sorry, I've missed Ben. Ben Yoaki. Ben Yoaki.
Hey, sorry, I was having issues unmuting. Aye, no, yes, sorry.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, the vote being 9 ayes and no nays, the consent agenda is adopted. All right. We are on to the next item of business, which is the Executive Director's report. I'm going to call on Executive Director Katie Pratt.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Is everyone hearing me okay? Hello. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, board members, members of the public joining us today. Thanks for being here. Again, my name is Katie Pratt. I'm Executive Director with Environmental Quality Board. And what I want to spend a few minutes discussing is just the logistics for today's meeting. So today the board is considering approval of a resolution to implement a pilot program for integrating climate change information into the environmental review program. Many of you know this is a topic that has come before the board numerous times over the past about 18 months. So the way today's meeting will work is that first we'll hear from EQB staff member Denise Wilson. She'll give a presentation with background information and an overview of the pilot project that is being proposed today. Board members, after you hear from Denise, there'll be time for clarifying questions and some discussion time at that point. But then we'll close out that and we will open it up for a public comment period. And I'll give more instructions on that in just a minute. Following public comment, board members, you will have time to discuss what you heard, discuss the feedback, and then move to discussing the resolution before taking a vote. Board members, we're unfortunately still behind our screens here today in September, but some best practices for our meeting today. Let's try to make it feel as much like sitting around that table in the boardroom as we can. Board members, please, you can use the raise your hand feature if you wish to make a comment, or just jump in, unmute yourself and jump in. If we'll watch for those hands being raised the best that we can. Board members, also, please state your name each time you speak. That just helps for folks who are following along remotely be able to tell who's talking. Sometimes you can't see everybody's face in your window on the screen, so it does help to restate your name. And then also, while we are in those discussion periods, please keep your camera on as much as possible. We know that there's times in a 3-hour meeting that you have to turn your camera off, but it does help us be in that discussion mode. So those are some best practices to keep in mind. Members of the public, there will be an opportunity to give public comment today on agenda item 4. If you do plan to comment, please read the procedures and guidelines that are for public comment that are in the meeting packet, and that is on page 3. And we'll remind you of those as we get closer to public comment. Please note, however, that we do have one just change we're making today due to a system-wide issue with WebEx. Typically, we use the chat feature to indicate if you wish to make public comment, but that's not available at this point. So we're going to use the raise your hand feature to indicate that if you would like to make public comment. And thank you, Eric, for pulling up this slide. On this slide, you can see that there's a email address, info.eqb@state.mn.us. You can contact us at any point during the meeting today if you have technical questions, or if you can't get the hand raise feature to work, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And we do ask that you raise your hand by 1:45, just so that we can understand the number of people wishing to give public comment today. Eric, next slide, please. So the raise your hand feature, if you're joining by computer, you'll look on the left-hand side of the screen here. It shows that what you're going to do is in the bottom right of your screen, there's a participant bubble. You're going to click on that. You're going to look at the participants, find your name, and then when you hover over your name, a little hand raise feature pops up, and you just click on that to raise your hand. Please just click on that and keep it raised until after you give public comment. If you're joining the meeting by phone, just slightly different, you'll see this, look on the screenshot, you see there's these 3 little dots at the bottom. You click on that and it'll give you the option to raise your hand. So that's how you find raise your hand. Again, please indicate by 1:45 that you'd like to make public comment. Keep that hand raised until after you're done. And if you have any difficulties, use the number use the email address that's listed, or alternatively, a phone number that you can call us at is 651-757-2873, 651-757-2873. And then as a final reminder, you are You do have the option of submitting a written comment to EQB at any time. You can submit those again to the info.eqb email address, and those comments are reviewed after the meeting and included in the subsequent board packet. So with that, I will turn it back to Chair Anderson Kelleher.
Well, thank you, Director Pratt. I wanted to start by giving a few framing comments today about the meeting. Climate change is an urgent issue for Minnesota and for Minnesotans. It threatens our families, our communities, and our livelihoods and our shared environment. During the last biennium, the EQB identified climate change as a focus of our work plan. In addition, Governor Walz signed an executive order directing state agencies to identify strategies for climate action. During board meetings, listening sessions, and through written comments, board members have heard the need for more climate information, as well as the sense of urgency for the information. We've also heard there's a need to support those providing the climate information. The EQB plays a unique role in overseeing the state's environmental review program. Currently, climate change is not consistently evaluated in environmental review documents. The board directed staff to present options for addressing this gap to provide greater clarity, certainty, and predictability to all project proposers for how potential climate effects can be assessed. After many months of discussion and input from the public, project proposers, government agencies, advocacy organizations, a pathway for updating the program is in front of us today that responds to many of the concerns that we have heard. I do want to say a word about what this project is not. In recent months, we've heard really, I think, what we can best term some misinformation about the EQB's work on the issue. It has often been called in emails a Green New Deal. To be clear, this project is not associated with the federal Green New Deal policies. And it also has to be said that the EQB is requiring environmental review as a separate process from permitting. Often this gets confused. The environmental review program does not approve or deny any project. It provides information. A foundational purpose of the environmental review program is to provide understanding through the preparation and public review of environmental documents before approval decisions are considered. Information included in these environmental documents is intended for making sound decisions that lead to a healthy environment for all Minnesotans. I look forward to discussing the proposal and the approach today with you. That concludes my framing comments. I'm just going to say, for the members of the public just joining us, a reminder to please use the procedure that's outlined in the packet for being able to get recognized for your up to 2 minute comments by 1:45. I also would just like to say that I think it's important, if you are representing a group and you have multiple speakers, because we do anticipate a lot of interest in speaking, that you first designate one person to make comments, and then we hopefully can get to everyone today. Again, as Director Pratt said, we will be continuing to take written comments. I'll now introduce our next item. It's the approval of a resolution to implement a pilot program for integrating climate change information into the environmental review program. I'm going to turn it over to Denise Wilson for the presentation.
Thank you.
Denise.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. For members of the audience, my name is Denise Wilson, and I work for the Environmental Quality Board as the Director of the State Environmental Review Program. This afternoon, I'm going to provide some information about an initiative to integrate climate change into the State Environmental Review Program. Next slide, please. I will begin my presentation with an overview of the Environmental Review Program as it relates to climate change, and talk briefly about the board authorities to make changes to the environmental review program. Next, I will provide some background on recommended changes to the environmental assessment worksheet form that came out of the work of an interagency climate technical team that was convened by members of the board. And finally, I will ask you to consider the climate technical team's recommendation for phased implementation of the changes to the environmental assessment worksheet form. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the State Environmental Review Program is established and implemented by the statutory authorities granted through the Minnesota Environmental Policy Act. Next slide. One of the primary objectives of the State Environmental Review Program is to provide usable information about a proposed project's potential environmental effects through the preparation and public review of environmental documents. Next slide. The Environmental Assessment Worksheet Form, or EAW, is the primary environmental document used to provide information about a proposed project's potential effects to land, air, water, etc., by the designated responsible governmental unit, or RGU, assigned by rule to evaluate the proposed project. There has been much discussion about whether or not greenhouse gas emissions are already required to be included on the current environmental assessment worksheet form, as they are a type of air pollution and may require further investigation in an EAW. And it is true that the RGU preparing the EAW may elect to include climate information on a case-by-case basis. That discretion will not change based on the recommendations we will discuss today. Next slide, please. The Minnesota Environmental Policy Act gives the board the responsibility for oversight of the State Environmental Review Program, and when you determine changes are needed, the authority to convene a team to investigate potentially significant environmental issues. The Minnesota Environmental Policy Act also provides the board with the authority to create and change Minnesota rules related to the Environmental Review Program, as well as create and amend environmental assessment worksheet forms. Next slide, please. Climate change has been identified as a potentially significant environmental issue by the legislature when they passed the Minnesota Next Generation Energy Act in 2007, by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, by board members when approving their biennial work plan in 2019, and by Governor Walz in his Executive Order 19-37. Also, through engagement with Environmental Review Program participants during Environmental Review Program improvement initiatives, the most recent rulemaking process, and daily technical assistance calls, concerns were raised by members of the public that climate information was not consistently included in environmental assessment worksheets, and from project proposers and government agencies asking for clarity about what types of climate assessment should be included. Next slide, please. In the fall of 2019, the board convened the Interagency Climate Technical Team to assess the effectiveness of the Environmental Review Program for considering climate change. In 2020, the Climate Technical Team spent time developing guiding principles and strategies, researching how other state environmental review programs are considering climate change, and deliberating over what climate information is needed and what information is possible, given existing tools and resources. And finally, proposing draft recommendations. Over the last 9 months, the Climate Technical Team implemented an extensive engagement process that included opportunities to submit written comments, take a survey, attend a listening session, and participate in one-on-one interviews. They also spent time reviewing and compiling feedback received during this engagement process and developing final recommendations. More information about the project history and public feedback can be found on the EQB project webpage. Next slide, please. In summary, the primary themes of public feedback included the urgent need for climate information that will result in reductions of impacts through informed action. We heard that responsible governmental units, or RGUs, and project proposers need assistance as they develop experience and expertise with climate assessment tools and resources. And we heard that RGUs and project proposers are concerned about the additional cost and time for projects to prepare the climate assessment. Next slide, please. The decision before you today reflects the interagency climate technical team's environmental review experience, climate expertise, and careful consideration of public feedback. In response to the urgent need for climate information, and because climate change is not consistently considered in environmental documents, the interagency climate technical team is recommending changes to the EAW form that include prompts to provide information about a proposed project's climate effects. In response to concerns about lack of expertise and experience with climate assessment, the interagency climate technical team is providing guidance to support the changes to the EAW form, as well as providing greater certainty and clarity to project proposers and RGUs for when and how the information may be included. In response to concerns about the need for RGU assistance, as well as concerns about the cost and time to provide the information, the climate technical team is recommending a phased approach for approving and implementing changes to the EAW form that allows time for learning and practice. The pilot program also provides the opportunity for gathering important information about time and cost of the recommended changes to the EAW form. Also, because the EAW form serves primarily to aid in the determination of the potential significance of the environmental effects of a proposed project, the climate technical team recommends continued consideration of changes to the decision criteria and continued consideration of a new mandatory environmental impact statement category for greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the changes to the revised draft environmental assessment worksheet form include a new item for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment, and also prompts in existing items for adaptation and resilience information. The new guidance also provided, provides support for the changes to the EAW form. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the climate technical team is recommending that the revised draft EAW form be implemented using a phased approach through a collaborative pilot program before board approval. As the climate technical team developed this recommendation, they discussed the framework of a collaborative pilot program. They considered important elements to include in a pilot program work plan. They identified what we hope to learn from a pilot program and considered an appropriate timeline. Next slide, please. The climate technical team believes the collaborative pilot program will provide an opportunity for RGUs and project proposers to practice using the revised draft EAW form and new guidance. We will be able to gather information about the effectiveness of the guidance and identify the need for additional tools. The climate technical team believes to be effective and meaningful, at a minimum, all state RGUs need to participate in the pilot program, and we need to recruit local RGUs and technical consultants with environmental review experience. And most importantly, we need to ensure the pilot program provides support for shared learning and experience with climate assessments for all pilot program participants. Next slide, please. These are the necessary elements of the pilot project work plan. The project work plan should include a plan for outreach to encourage local government and technical consultant registration. The work plan should include recurring forums for discussion, information sharing, and support, as well as include opportunities during the forums to invite subject matter expert speakers. The work plan should include an approach to monitor implementation of the revised draft EAW form and should include updates on progress reported to members of the public and to members of the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee. And the results of the pilot program should be reported to the board no later than December of 2022. Next slide, please. The pilot program will help us understand if concerns from those opposed to changes to the environmental assessment worksheet form are actual barriers before broad implementation. We hope to learn what is working, what is not working as RGUs complete the draft revised EAW form. We hope to better understand the effectiveness of the climate information. We hope to identify additional resources and guidance that may be needed to ensure confidence with the information provided. And we hope to understand if adjustments are needed to the EAW form that might improve its effectiveness. Next slide, please. If approved, there's a defined timeline for implementation of the pilot program and when results of the pilot program will be brought back to the board for a decision on the revised EAW form. So from October through November, we'll be developing the detailed work plan that I just discussed that talks about how we would conduct the outreach, coordinate resources and speakers, and do some planning for the forums, and also develop the process for registration. From January through September, we would implement the pilot program starting in January with an update to the Environmental Review Implementation Subcommittee, and where we would share that detailed work plan. And then we would, during the period of the pilot program, we would host those engagement forums and collect the information. In September, we would compile the information and then come back to the board and present the final EAW form for consideration of approval at that time. The next slide, please. The decision in the board resolution is whether or not to approve a pilot program to implement the recommended changes to the EAW form that includes a new item for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment, as well as prompts and existing items for adaptation and resiliency information. The next slide, please. Here is the specific language for your decision today. If you have the option as board members to approve the resolution as drafted, to make a motion and vote to amend the language in the resolution, or vote against the resolution. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, and I am available if you would like, if any of the board members have questions today, or anyone in the audience would like to follow up at a future date, please feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Denise. We are now, I appreciate your presentation. We are now in the section of the meeting where board members can ask questions of Denise, of Director Pratt, of others on the EQB staff. I do want to mention that Nick Martin has joined us, as well as Sue Vento, representing the Met Council. So I believe those are two additions to our roll call and quorum. I want to also just mention, and I don't think we can accommodate this right now. I know there are a couple members of the public joining us today who have to leave before we get into public comment. I think we are going to, looking at where we are on the agenda, we are likely to enter public comment right around 2 p.m. or so. So if you can hang in there, that would be great. Otherwise, please submit your comments in writing to the board. And then Chair Zelli of the Met Council has also just joined us. So I believe I see at least one hand up right now, and I believe that is Board Member Forsberg.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've had a text communication with Brian Murdoch, and he's not able to join us for the entire meeting. He has asked, though, that I let him know before a vote is taken, and he'd like to be able to step in at that time, if that's all right.
Absolutely. That would be terrific. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, that was the comment. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right. Assistant Commissioner Renande.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm not only representing my views, I've had a chance to discuss this motion with Commissioner Arnold before she left for her trip. And it's our view that what doesn't get measured cannot be managed. So this motion is a good idea. We have had in the electrical power sector a reasonable amount of success in driving down emissions over the last decade, partially because outside of the environmental review process, the Utilities Commission takes into account social cost of carbon. But this needs to happen now throughout the economy because this is a global problem across all economic sectors. And aside from the mitigation, adaptation and resiliency for power and transportation infrastructure is going to become very critical with spring flooding instances of extreme heat driving maximum generation events in our electrical power sector. I know I cannot vote today because I'm a proxy, but I strongly support this motion.
All right, and I'll try to take them in the order I saw them, but next, Board Member Kohner Steenberg.
Madam Chair, just a kind of a procedural clarification. If a board member wanted to offer an amendment to the resolution, what would be the appropriate moment to do that?
That will be a little bit later after public comment when we move the resolution before us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Stroman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is a little bit on the flow of information as assuming the board votes to move forward with the pilot. And I think Denise did a great job of describing the pilot. And one of the things I appreciated was the inclusion of kind of the monitoring and the feedback to both the ERAS subcommittee and the board. I think that's a comment we heard along the way, what are we aiming for and how do we know if we're successful? And I think one thing I just maybe would ask if we could flesh out a little bit more as those progress reports or whatever we want to call them come back to the board, how can we also make sure that members of the public who are following this are aware of that progress as well and have an opportunity maybe to provide some feedback in terms of what they're seeing as well, in addition to those of us who sit on the board.
Commissioner Stroman, I really appreciate your point. And I think working with staff, should this pilot pass later today, one of the things we'll be working on is the design of those feedback loops. And so one idea is to have really the subcommittee of the subcommittee that's much more engaged with staff in a really meaningful way to be able to both keep other board members up to date and have a regular reporting system back to the board from the board. I do think that is an important piece of this. The second part is working with staff to make sure that whether RGU has joined the pilot, there are going to be others who are interested in the pilot. And I just know from some conversations with businesses that there are businesses who are very interested in learning along the way too, but they would not be really eligible to be in the pilot. They may not even have a project in the next year or two, but they want to give feedback. And so I think we can find a way to have that sort of feedback loop to be able to really gather as much information as possible. And I'll just also add that I think one of the needs, and Denise, there were many things that I think you highlighted that are needed in this process, and why I'm such a strong believer in a pilot as a step in implementation is also the development of technical tools. Both the finding of those technical tools or the development of those technical tools to be able to help in the process. So I appreciate your point. I hope that helps. There's going to be some development work to do after this point before we can fully move into the pilot phase. Okay, I'm gonna, let's see, I see that Temporary Commissioner Tester has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will the work plan identify or prescribe what projects are going to be included? You know, are they particularly new projects or projects already in the queue that haven't been started or acted upon? Or and can the agency implement the project prior to January 1 of 2022, or are we all starting with the same baseline?
So I think I would like either Director Pratt or Ms. Wilson to respond to that question. I will say that I think I know part of that answer, and that is if a project is under review currently and it is approved before January 2022, I don't think this process will have any effect on that particular project. So I'm going to ask Denise to further elaborate.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board Member Tester. So now that the EAW form is available, there isn't any reason that any RGU couldn't use that form at any time. You don't have to be a member of the pilot program to be able to use that. The pilot program offers us an opportunity to identify those folks that are committed to using the form and to provide the support as they go through the process and the learning. That said, if the pilot program will begin according to the timeline in January. If a project is already underway and using the form and would like to join and register and be a part of the process as the evaluation happens, that can happen too. They can be a part and join the program at any point. And so I think it's not intended to be limiting people, but it's meant to be supporting people as they choose to go through this process.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on to Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you. And I could kind of leave this for later too, but the thing I'm just kind of thinking of too as we enter this into a pilot and the work plan, is how do we, do we account for, changes and new information going forward? As I, see even in agriculture, I feel like things change, and if, we don't have it quite right, or there's new pieces that come forward, or our numbers or methodology, in how we, quantify greenhouse gases, but also what mitigation efforts are and how we're, accounting for them or scoring them. I think it's something that as we're looking in the pilot, what are the assurances that, we're accepting and looking at those possibilities or changes, and something like that is kind of what I'm still kind of struggling with in this whole process, as this is not that it's a new piece, but I just want to make sure that as the proposers are going through this and everything, that it's meaningful and fair as can be. And so that's just kind of my general comment, and still kind of mulling it through here as we hear from speakers too as well.
So Denise, I think I'm going to call on you. I do understand it that the document looks for information. It asks both the proposers and the RGUs to work together on how to quantify or how to reflect that information. It does not specify how the information or the mitigations, but it helps, I think, provide some boundaries around mitigations or ideas around mitigations. So I think there's quite a bit of fluidity and flexibility in that, but I'll also turn it to Denise.
So that's correct, Madam Chair and Board Member Peterson. And we have heard that concern from RGUs that the science is evolving, and it has been evolving for a while. And but many of the elements of the environmental assessment worksheet, the tools that we use to do that assessment, they do evolve over time. But this, because of the lack of experience and expertise with this particular type of assessment, there seems to be more sensitivity But I would like to just affirm that the climate technical team, when they were trying to determine what elements to include on the EAW form, they really looked at what was possible and what was needed using existing tools. And also to say that there's a lot of experience and expertise, in the state with doing this type of assessment. We have the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that's been underway for quite some time. And there are there's ways to sort of mitigate that impact of the evolving science. Some of the ideas that we've considered through the pilot program are really helping people look at the tools and resources and maybe getting some experience and expertise in subject matter experts for helping them go through the process of identifying which is the best tool, what are the best practices, and how should they make these decisions based on sort of the uniqueness of that project. And so again, that's another driver behind the idea for the pilot program.
Commissioner Peterson, would you like to follow up?
I might later on, and let me think about that some, but thank you. I appreciate the answer.
So I see board member Forsberg, and I think that's a new hand.
Yes, ma'am. I've got a couple of concerns, and one is, first, I'd like to point out that I do recognize the science of climate change and see it as a serious threat, and recognize that human activity is certainly contributing to it. But at the same time, I look at the revised EAW form, and I see it as a major expansion of the EAW to the point where really it's not a worksheet anymore. It's approaching what we used to do for an EIS and for a thesis type of a project. So because of that, I've got concerns about the project proposer, the cost, and the time to do this additional work. And those projects are part of the public health, safety, and welfare in many cases in our economy. So that's important. The other item is on the pilot project. If we do go ahead, I strongly favor the pilot project. One thing I think we need to address is since it's voluntary for RGUs and since it is quite complex, I see the metro counties and perhaps some regional counties, RGUs volunteering to do it. We would not be getting then the input from the smaller rural RGUs and from rural counties. And we need to have a way of getting them involved in the pilot program and participating and get their input. Thank you.
Thank you, board member Forsberg. I do believe that outreach is going on with both the Association of Counties and the League of Minnesota Cities so that we have a broad range of participation. It is not, I want to reiterate, it is not necessary that the RGU be contemplating any projects coming forward during this period of time to participate if this goes forward, but they are welcome to participate, to be able to give that critical feedback, especially from, we want to see all range of RGUs participating if they go into the program to help us with the pilot. So not just the largest counties and the counties that have a lot of staffing, but also small counties and counties that maybe don't even see a project very often. I think that's a really very important point as well. Let's see. Commissioner, Board Member Heidi Tollefson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question of Denise. Could you explain a little bit more about the relationship of adaptation and resilience planning to the traditional mitigation measures? Does that make sense, that question?
Madam Chair, Board Member Heidi Tollefson, it does. I think throughout the document right now, there are prompts for identifying the potential environmental effects and then opportunities that the project proposer has identified for mitigating those effects. And the climate information will be no different. It will also prompt an opportunity to provide that information. And as I mentioned, there's a new item for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment. And specifically, it's a little different because of the nature of this type of pollutant. We thought it would actually provide greater understanding and included the option and the prompt to ask project proposers to describe the mitigation that they selected and why they selected that type of mitigation for to achieve reductions in their potential environmental effects, but also talk about other types of mitigation that they considered but did not select. And so that would be under the new item. And then embedded in existing items, I think, as you mentioned, there's prompts in stormwater, in wastewater, and other types of evaluations where we prompted them to think about adaptation and resilience information. And so there will also be an opportunity throughout that document to, when they quantify an impact, to also talk about how that impact might be reduced with other activities that are planned. Is that kind of where you were going?
Oh, okay. Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may ask just one more.
Absolutely.
Question. And that is, will there be as you look towards the toolbox, that the tools that you'll be creating to support this endeavor, is there an opportunity for some kind of documentation of best practices that are easy for an RGU to go through and select from? I know Commissioner Peterson has, really guided us through some of, and Ag has some really great best practices, tools themselves. And so I'm wondering how you think that might be incorporated into the tools for the pilot and going forward.
So Ms. Wilson, if I could first, and then you can follow up on this. One of the things that we have been discussing and are implementing at the Department of Transportation, which I think is helpful in this area, since many times projects do revolve around filling out an EAW does revolve around a transportation project. We are developing at the Department of Transportation and are working with a calculator that will be able to calculate greenhouse gases, both in terms of inputs into a project as well as the what is going to happen in the future after the project is built or done. Does it increase greenhouse gases, reduce greenhouse gases? Are they the same? And so it's a very comprehensive tool, and we are working with that. And our goal actually at MnDOT is, as we often do, to provide that tool to other units of government so that they don't have to create that tool. They would have access to the tool that we have already really developed. And what I would say about that is that MnDOT is working with that tool. We are starting to apply that tool to our first projects now. And so I think that we're gaining a lot of feedback and information from that tool. I'll let Denise speak to other tools that may be available.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, Madam Chair, Board Member Heidi Tellefson, again, that was one of the drivers for making the recommendation for a pilot program, was to go through the learning to find out what additional guidance, tools, or resources might be needed as people actually go through the process. And we do know and heard through feedback that one of the challenges is, that we developed guidance that applied to the program and applied to all project types, but that there was really a need and a request for more specific sector guidance. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to invite, experts to the table and develop exactly what you're suggesting. And it would be based on need that was discovered and learned through the process.
Thank you.
Okay, I am scanning board members' hands as well as if you are on screen and you're seeking recognition. Otherwise, I think we have concluded this period of the meeting, which was a period for board members to ask questions about either the overall project or the pilot. And we are going to next move into the public comment phase. And my understanding is there's approximately 10 people who have signed up to make public comment. Because we have put aside a complete hour for this, I would like to, with no objection, have 3 minutes of public comment instead of 2. And certainly, if someone still wishes to be recognized, please go through the procedure that was mentioned in the board packet. But we are going to take those 10 in order. And I believe that Faith is going to help us with this process as the EQB staff. I do want to mention that it is important that you introduce yourself before you speak. If you're representing an organization, please also mention that, as well as just a general guideline. I come from the legislative setting, and I know that people probably think that's a rough and tumble world because they have maybe watched a fiery debate in the legislature. But in a lot of ways, it's actually really a process around speaking to the issues at hand. And it's one of the things that I want us to really work on, both as our dialogue with the public as board members, as well as the public coming before the board. The important part of this is today we are giving an opportunity for public comment on this item. And so that is where we are focused and hoping that the members of the public will focus. And then we're going to work in the future to find ways for more general participation for the public. I think all of us desire a day when we can go back out and do things like the Environmental Congress, as well as meetings in person where we can really have that dialogue. But today's meeting is really about this item. And so I hope that folks will keep to the item at hand and be able, and I will obviously step in if that's not the case, or if something becomes unusually targeted at people's motivations, or it becomes personal. So I think we all can model respect and civility as we discuss this issue. So I'm going to call on Faith to begin the process of public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one commenter who needs to leave early, and that is Lucas. And I'm sorry, Lucas, if I don't pronounce your name correctly. Sjöström. He may have had to leave. So we'll just go down the list alphabetically here. We have Alex Burns. Alex, you're now unmuted.
Okay, you can hear me now? Okay.
Yes, but speak up a bit, Alex. You're a little bit soft.
Okay, how about now? Is that better? Still a little quiet? I have headphones in, that could be it. Try this.
Also, Lucas wasn't unmuted. He was telling me so.
Okay, maybe we should go back to Lucas, and Alex, we'll get to you in a second. I think that if you can adjust your microphone, if you're using a headset, something's a little bit off. So Lucas, if we can unmute Lucas Sjostrom.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Commissioner and Chair Anderson Kelleher and EQB Board. I will be relatively brief, I think. I just wanted to say thank you for accepting our letter on behalf of agriculture groups. I'm Lucas Sjostrom, Executive Director, Minnesota Milk Producers Association. I was able to serve on the EQB ERAP, and so good to see you virtually, Denise. I am indeed at another meeting with another sector of state government right now, so I'm going to run as soon as I sign off. But going through this once with a project proposer, I guess, through PCA as our normal RGU, just wanted to make sure we're using the most updated science and appreciate the acknowledgement that it's changing. And so as we do this, we understand the urgency in agriculture of climate change. We feel it, our customers see it, but at the same time, we feel that we've been vastly overrepresented. And we said that in our comments last year, but didn't have much to put behind that. And the August 7th report from the UN kind of showed that we were right. And I would say luckily, but it wasn't lucky. We saw and we invested in the science to prove that. So as we're thinking about work and PCA, we work very closely with, and we're always looking to mitigate work that's redundant and not needed in this technological era. It wouldn't be so crazy to alleviate this work from feedlots, from PCA, and as proposers, because I think the science is going to continue to show we are almost no, or possibly an opportunity to help with global cooling instead of warming, if you'll use that term. So I'll stop there. I realize the issue is bigger than just one calculated sheet within PCA, but thank you again, Commissioner and Chair Anderson Kelleher, for your kind response. And thanks for letting me speak at the meeting.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate them. All right, Alex, let's see if we have better sound.
All right, I switched headphones. Can you hear me now?
You are very soft for me. I don't know if it's just me, but I haven't had a problem with anyone else's audio. So outside.
It's relatively soft.
Is that better?
Better, much better.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for moving this issue forward. I couldn't agree more with sorry, to introduce myself, I'm Alex Burns. I live in Minneapolis. I couldn't agree more with the comment that what is not measured cannot be managed. So I really appreciate that this is being considered. And I have both a comment and a question. And I feel like I think it's really important that we apply this new climate lens and these measurement tools to projects that are currently underway and that are in the environmental review process right now. Minnesota and in our state is making decisions on projects that have major climate implications and could either lock in increases or reductions in greenhouse gas emissions for decades. This includes like transportation projects like rethinking I-94 and I-94-252. Transportation is the state's largest emission sector, and that's just one area of this climate work that I follow in particular. And so I guess my question builds on the question by Commissioner Tester, which is, would this new EAW framework and like greenhouse gas inventory tools be applied to projects like the ones I mentioned that are currently in the EIS process? And I apologize as well, Madam Chair. I had to step out quickly and I came back and I heard you talking like the tail end of talk of like a MnDOT tool to do this. So I just wanted to ask what the status of that is And if it is something that you're considering, I would strongly encourage you to do so. So thanks again for the opportunity to comment, and I'll mute myself.
So I think what's best is if we can answer those questions a bit later and keep on public comment for the time being. I can, I think, answer all of your questions, Alex, that relate to MnDOT, and we can answer that overall question. But let's keep going. Faith, do you want to call on the next person?
Next, we have Amelia Voss.
I'll take a nod if anyone can hear me. Okay, I got a thumbs up. That's great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Amelia Voss. I'm a regulatory attorney at Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. And I just wanted to start by reminding us all of the context that you all are making decisions in today, which is a bit grim. But I think it's important to note that this summer we really saw climate change in our face in Minnesota. We had drought, we had unrelenting heat that, you know, they're telling us is coming back this weekend. And it affected everything from our agricultural and tourism economies to just simple life at the cabin. And also this summer, we learned from the IPCC that we need to get our emissions down 50% by 2030. And for Minnesota, that means we have 9 years to cut our emissions by 42%, which is a lot. The good news, and the news that I'm excited about, is that we have this really exciting tool that you all have been working on. This tool to start understanding the emissions of new projects before we build them. And I just want to highlight that the work of the interagency technical team has been robust. They have a form that this board could adopt today. It's ready to go, and I think the materials in your packet from the public show that there's really strong support from the public for moving forward urgently. But today we're talking about a pilot. And, you know, I want to be honest that the pilot truthfully will take some extra time. It's going to prolong full-scale implementation of this new EAW form. So for this resolution that's before you today to make sense, you really need to make sure that the pilot is adding meaningful learning and improvements to the great work that the interagency technical team has already done. And to do that, I urge you to make 2 small, easy changes to the pilot proposal to make sure that it's indeed moving us forward and adding useful climate information to this process. The first change that I'm urging you to make through amendment is really easy, and it's just to amend the resolution to require that the EAW form be brought back to you for a vote no later than December 2022. As we heard from Ms. Wilson in her presentation, that's the plan, but I think it's really important to put that in the resolution to show the public that you are being responsive to the urgency and to their requests to move this forward expeditiously. And the second and last request I have of you, but the one that I think is perhaps most important, is that I ask you to amend the resolution to direct the staff to modify question 18B on the form. And I think question 18B should ask the pilot participants to consider possible greenhouse gas mitigations outside of what they've already included in their project design. And then an explanation of why any mitigations they discovered were not included in the project design. And the reason I ask you to make that change is because I think this one simple change will allow the much needed dialogue that everybody is craving on this issue. It forces the inquiry for project proposers to think beyond what they've always done, what's possible. And it also shows the public that they've done that inquiry and that what they've put forward as a project is within the realm of reason of what they can do to address our climate effects. It creates a dialogue and a transparency back and forth instead of an adversarial posture where we're all pointing fingers and saying, you should have done more. So if there's one way to make what the proposal that you have in front of you today more meaningful, I think it is to make sure that those going through the pilot look at an inquiry of what other mitigations are possible and tell the public why any that were possible weren't chosen. Perhaps it's cost, perhaps it's technical feasibility, but having that transparency is really important as we go forward in this process together. Thank you very much.
Faith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next speaker is Carol Andrews.
Hello, good afternoon. Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you. All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Carol Andrews. I'm the Public Works Department Environmental Engineer for St. Louis County. In addition to tracking changes to environmental rules and policies for our own projects, our county also leads the Minnesota County Engineers Association Environment Committee. With regard to revising the EAW form to include information related to climate change, we believe it's important to ensure that the benefits of this change are commensurate with the added cost. That cost will depend on the degree of detail of the required information. If changes increase the typical EAW cost, but also yield significant benefits, for example, a county makes a significant change to a project design as the result of the review process, then that's clearly worthwhile. But we need to keep in mind, however, the associated, I guess you'd call it opportunity cost. Additional money spent on preparing an EAW, gathering information and so on, is then not available to the county to put towards implementing projects. They could also provide benefits to addressing climate change, things like installing e-vehicle charging stations and improving busy street pedestrian crosswalks to enable more people to walk and bike rather than drive. As such, St. Louis County does support the proposed resolution to conduct a pilot project program to evaluate the draft environmental assessment worksheet form, as we believe this will help ensure that the final form revisions strike an appropriate cost-benefit balance. We look forward to working with the EQB to ensure a role for the County Engineers Association, and as Board Member Forsberg said, especially the rural counties in this process. Thank you.
Faith, you can continue on until we run out of public folks.
Great. So next we have Darren Milkey.
Can I get a thumbs up or something to Darren Milkey with Carver County? Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members of the board. My name is Darren Milkey, and I am the Deputy County Engineer for Carver County, which is one of the fastest growing areas in the state of Minnesota. I am also the project manager for the next phase of the Highway 212 project in Benton Township, which is between the cities of Norwood, Young America, and Cologne. And this includes the expansion of 5 miles of Highway 212 from 2 to 4 lanes to improve the safety in particular, and also the freight mobility of this highway corridor. Carver County is the lead agency for this state highway project, but we're working in partnership with MnDOT, Benton Township, and the cities of Norwood, Young America, and Cologne. This project will require an EAW as part of the project development efforts, and Carver County is interested as a local government unit to participate in the EAW pilot program as proposed. As part of this project, in order to provide our valuable input from a small metro county perspective on the new EAW form. With that, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Next we have David Pelican.
Can you give a thumbs up if you can hear me? All right, excellent. So my name is David Pelican, and I'm the Policy Associate with Conservation Minnesota. You guys should each have received written comment already from the organization as well as from our members. So I'm just here to reiterate those comments. First, I just want to say thank you to the members of this board for taking up the issue of climate considerations and environmental review. As you know, we're in an urgent, pervasive fight against climate change, and this is a fight that we can't win until we recognize its connection to nearly every aspect of our lives and of the projects that we propose. Updating our environmental review process is an important and overdue step toward that recognition and toward subsequent progress. So as climate change accelerates and impacts the state of Minnesota, our leaders should take responsibility and take immediate action to commit the state toward a robust process for climate considerations. The resolution before the board today, creating a pilot program for partial implementation of revised EAW forms, is a good opportunity to start this process and to further improve these forms. But the resolution, as it stands, falls just short of the commitment necessary for this fight. Our organization believed that the best option for Minnesota would have been to proceed toward full implementation immediately. And even though the board has opted toward partial implementation through a pilot program, we still believe that there needs to be a more clear pathway toward full implementation, addressing all project proposers. As it stands, this resolution sets an indefinite delay in the approval for full implementation of revised EAW forms, presenting the EAW form to the board, but not necessarily mandating a board vote. To reflect the urgency and the seriousness of this crisis, we hope that you will amend this resolution to include a staff directive to bring a final revised draft EAW form to the board for a vote by the end of 2022. And I know Denise mentioned that this was part of the timeline. We just hope that there's strict language within this resolution to mandate that. So with appropriate changes to create a clear process for full approval, this resolution can create an important progress toward further recognizing our role in climate change and toward improving the management of our climate change impacts. So we hope that you amend this resolution to include a deadline for full implementation, and we hope that you will vote in favor of this amended resolution. So thank you again for your work on behalf of Minnesotans, and we're excited to stand with you in this fight against climate change. So thank you again.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Ann Ness.
Do you hear me? Thumbs up, anyone? Oh, thank you. Okay. I appreciate the plan to update the environmental impact worksheet, environmental assessment worksheet to address climate change impact and mitigation. But the current EAW failed to trigger an EIS in a project in my community. And so I think the EAW needs to be changed right away because climate change can't wait for so many years for us to start triggering an EIS when it's needed. The project in my neighborhood was going to bring a lot more traffic into an overly traffic affected neighborhood and near the Arsenic Triangle. And the EAW said it was fine. So there was no EIS done. And this is a serious problem. Projects are going forth because the EAW does not trigger an EIS when it's needed. So please, I would like it if you would amend the proposal to require climate change mitigation questions on all EAWs starting January 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Joy Anderson.
Oh, no. Hello? Yes, you can hear me. Okay, I'm sorry about that. This is Joy Anderson. I'm a senior staff attorney at MCEA. I wanted to support all the comments from my colleague, Amelia Voss, who already spoke. But I also wanted to add that MCEA, and I know other environmental organizations, are really excited about the opportunity that this pilot presents. The work that the EQB staff has done has been amazing. We have a really great and robust form in front of us, but the pilot provides us with an opportunity to strengthen it even further. We think that there's more really useful information that could be collected about mitigations and about the Next Generation Energy Act goals and how projects will affect achievement of those goals. That will be really important, and that we see can be added to the form as this pilot project goes forward. I also want to say that I'm really encouraged to hear Commissioner Stroman's comments about transparency of the pilot, and I look forward to receiving the regular updates on how the pilot is going. I know that lots of members of the public are very interested in this pilot and will want to be receiving that information as well. So I'm really encouraged to hear that the EQB is contemplating that members of the public will want to be informed, will be able to get information about the pilot, and that hopefully we will be involved as much as we can. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kathleen Schuler.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Kathleen Schuler. I'm Policy Director with Health Professionals for Healthy Climate. We're a network of health professionals across the state of Minnesota. We support the EQB's recommendations that all new projects going through environmental review be required to consider climate change impacts. But we'd like to see this implemented in January 2022 rather than a pilot project. The health effects of the climate crisis have never been more evident. Over 220 national and international medical, nursing, public health journals have called on the world's leaders to act on climate immediately. Current efforts have not been enough to keep greenhouse gases below the 1.5 degrees Celsius tipping point, which the IPCC has recently stated we may reach in the coming decades. One of those journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, notes that our health is already being harmed by global temperature increases. They further state, the science is unequivocal, a global increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius risks catastrophic harm to health that will be impossible to reverse. So the health community in all these journals affirms the need for all segments of society at all levels of government to set targets for net zero emissions, including local governments. That's why this proposal is very important. Requiring information in environmental review is a modest step in helping local governments evaluate and reduce climate impacts from new projects. If you do decide to go forward with a pilot project, which it looks like that's what's on the table, we urge you to set a firm deadline for the EQB to vote, as other commenters have said, vote on that by the end of December so that we can go forward with full implementation. And also, we encourage cities and counties to be actively involved in this process so that you can gain meaningful information for the EAW going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Kurt Schultz.
All right, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Excellent. My name is Kurt Schultz. I work for the City of St. Paul, the Department of Planning and Economic Development. While we were waiting for final approval, the City of St. Paul wants to express its interest in participating in the pilot project, should the board adopt it. We are excited to see climate change and greenhouse gas emissions addressed through the environmental review process, and we believe this will dovetail nicely with the work already underway in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sam Benson.
Folks hear me okay? Great. Thank you all for the chance to speak. My name is Sam Benson, and I'm on staff as a policy organizer with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. We work with faith communities and people of faith to advocate for action to address the climate crisis. Our members understand the moral urgency of moving swiftly to decarbonize our economy and doing so in an equitable and just manner. We firmly believe that implementing this new proposal is the right thing to do and should be done as soon as possible. This new proposal is a needed and important step if our state is going to meet its greenhouse gas reduction goals. We believe that the proposal should be adopted in full instead of simply as a pilot project. We simply cannot afford further delays on climate action. Minnesota is currently falling behind on the goals that were set out in the 2007 Next Generation Energy Act. We hope that the EQB will move to adopt this proposal in full and in a timely manner so Minnesota can get on the right track towards meeting its carbon reduction goals. If the EQB does approve a pilot, I ask that you require a firm end date for the pilot and that you require the matter to come back to you for a vote authorizing broad-scale implementation no later than December 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. And last with the hand raised is Willis Madison.
One working. Testing 1, 2, 3. You hear me? Oh, I'm sad. There we go. Madam Chair, members of the EQB, my name is Willis Matson. And before the timer starts the clock running on my 3 minutes, I'd like to request permission of the chair to raise a point of order.
Mr. Madison, you are not a member of the board. You could not raise a point of order. Why don't you just include it in your comments what your objection or concern is?
Yeah, it's a procedural matter, so maybe not a point of order. I so much appreciated the dialogue that went on between board members and question and answer. And in the spirit of building the shared understanding that the public comment period is ostensibly presented, I'm hoping to have an engagement with the board in this process. There's citizen comments have little way of knowing whether or not there's any understanding reached when there's a comment made. So I'd like to propose that we use the WebEx facility that shows acknowledgement of shared understanding at a key juncture during my comments. So with that point made, allow me to begin by citing the primary goals of the environmental review process as cited in MIPA: to encourage productive, enjoyable harmony between human beings and their environment, to promote efforts that will prevent or eliminate damage to the environment and biosphere and stimulate health and welfare of human beings, and to engage understanding of the ecological systems and natural resources important to the state and nation. Next, I want to point out that our climate and ecosystem related events happening here in Minnesota and all around the globe, that I understand the proposed EAW worksheet changes are intended to address. Surely the EQB board members are exposed to news coverage in catastrophic storm, droughts, floods, fires, and losses of human life, now directly attributable to climate-induced weather events. Less well covered by the popular news media are the interrelated ecosystem dysfunctions occurring here in Minnesota and around the globe. Dysfunctions that are every bit as existential threat to human life as these climate events. These events are well documented in the scientific literature and by various United Nations climate and biodiversity panels. Excuse me. Quite fortuitously, scientists tell us that the two crises, climate and ecosystems, are interdependent, such that the solution of one is also the solution of the other, with extensive co-benefits for water, air quality, as well as equity and human health. I'm told by EQB staff that the board periodically receives sufficient briefings, alerts, and citations or references to such documentation, such that the board considers itself well informed on these developments. So my first attempt at testing our shared understanding is to determine if there is agreement that the significance of both the scientific data and our personal anecdotal observations are consistent. That is to say that the MIPA goals for our living in harmony with and preventing damage to the environment, to our biosphere, and even to our general human health has and is not being accomplished here in Minnesota by the environmental review or regulatory process it is designed to inform. And if this is true, it would mean our shared understanding is that in spite of the hundreds and even thousands of EAWs and dozens of EISs prepared in the last 50 years in Minnesota have been insufficient to avoid or mitigate these adverse climate and ecosystem impacts. In fact, can we not agree that nearly all, if not all, such documents have produced negative declarations, neg-decs, that there's negative declaration of no significant adverse impact on these critical resources, and in doing so has been a serious deficiency of the program? How many board members would agree that this is currently the case? And if you'd use this system of facility of raising a hand, I would like to see whether or not there's agreement that the environmental review process, given our
Mr.
current
Mason,
climate
you are
and
at
ecosystem
time.
situation, is it
Mr.
sufficient?
Matson, we cannot have that sort of engagement during public comment, but individual members of the board may be able to address that when they make comments.
Okay, then I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you. Finally, assuming we now have a shared understanding, and I was not able to get confirmation of that, of the problem at hand, is that the board members believe, as expressed by your expected adoption today, that the EAW worksheet changes proposed are likely to produce more positive declarations and lead to the kinds of transformational changes in energy source, land use, resource extraction, toxic emissions, and invasive species introduction on the scope, scale, and schedule that thousands of scientists and United Nations Advisory Panel now declare are necessary. Do EQB board members anticipate that simply a more consistent greenhouse gas quantification and reciting of adaptation and resiliency features of the proposed projects will be effective instruments for resolving the climate and ecosystem challenge we face?
Mr.
I
Matson,
propose
you are
that
at
the
time.
problem is okay, I'll conclude if I may. The problem is not properly stated, that it's not inconsistency, but the lack of substantive consideration of climate. If you vote to approve the proposed resolution that not only provides now only provides a pilot study of the new AW worksheet, I think it is fair to say that we have not a shared understanding of the scope, scale, and urgency of the climate and ecosystem crisis we're facing. I would urge you to remand the proposal back to staff for a more robust expansion that would lead to more positive declaration and consideration of alternatives to resolve the problem of climate and ecosystem collapse. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we do have one more speaker, Sam Rosemark.
Please let Mr. Rosemark speak.
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me all right? Awesome. Great. Yeah. Hello all. My name is Sam Rosemark. I am a former emerging environmental leader member. So I was a part of the call that we all had on May, where we kind of shared our perspectives and stories about climate change. And I also was a part of the Environmental Congress in 2019. So it's been a great effort and great program, and I see how valuable all of your work is, and I want to thank you all for bringing this change forward to the environmental assessment worksheet. I think this is a good change and a much needed change, and will definitely help Minnesota reach its goals in terms of the Next Generation Energy Act. Minnesota, I believe, only has reduced its greenhouse gases by about 8%. The act calls for a much more robust decrease than that. So hopefully this will help us get there. I do think that an improvement that could be made would be fully implementing this change in terms of considering greenhouse gases as well as climate change mitigation methods. First, it would cause us to be happening directly for all project proposals rather than just the ones included in the pilot. So I would strongly encourage for this to be fully implemented, or that it be brought back as soon as possible, and that is guaranteed to be brought back to be fully implemented. I understand that this is a new program. There might be things that need to be worked out, but I do think that changes can be made before before the pilot is essentially over. I also want to kind of thank and appreciate that the climate change mitigation and resiliency factors are included in the form. I do think that it would make sense to, rather than just asking what mitigation methods were considered, to also ask ask other common mitigation measures that could have been used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and if they were not used, they should have to explain why those those mitigation methods were not used. For example, energy efficiency lighting or things of that nature. So thank you all again for your time and your valuable work. I appreciate all that you do, and so the rest of the EELs, as I'm sure many share my same sentiment. And I also want to thank you for supporting the Emerging Environmental Leader program. I think it helps bring down those barriers in terms of young people getting involved in their state government. So thank you for all your work, and thank you for your time.
Well, I want to thank everyone who's commented today. We really appreciate your comments. And I want to give you a little roadmap of where we're going to next here, because we are a bit ahead of schedule. And so I will answer a few of the questions that were raised, just so that for the effort to be clear about what this process is and isn't. And then the second part of that is, if I will look to Denise, if there was anything that was easily answerable that I don't cover, that we can cover, that were raised by public comment. Then we'll move into having a board member move the resolution before us with a second. That will allow us as board members to, if there are any amendments to the resolution, as well as board members, I think probably will want to make individual comments before we vote for the most part. So that's the roadmap going forward. When we conclude, we will be to closing and adjournment after that. So I just want to be clear where we are, because we are a bit ahead of schedule right now. So Mr. Burns raised some questions about MnDOT specific projects, the 25294 project and the Rethinking I-94 project. This, I think, can often happen. Those projects, an EAW is a lower standard than an EIS. Each of those projects are in EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, a much higher review of the projects. They are already in that status, and we certainly can talk offline or during, we have upcoming policy advisory committees for both of those projects that Mr. Burns often attends, and we can have a discussion of what that means to be doing EIS. I also want to share with you from his comments, we are at MnDOT working on this tool that we call MICE, and the MICE tool is the greenhouse gas calculator. We are starting to implement that on projects, and our goal is to work with it internally at MnDOT and then be able to make it available to other units of government. And then I want to clarify one thing that I think sometimes happens. Sometimes people hear pilot and they think study. That's not what this is. This is a step in implementation to fully implementing changes to the EAW form that will look at climate issues, including greenhouse gases. I think it's critical we stop referring to this as a study. This is not a study. This is action. It is a way to implement with a group that is a bit smaller than the full implementation. I have taught policy implementation. I've obviously been involved with it for a long time. I feel firmly on solid ground that this is the right move for the EQB to move into next. Some members of the public brought up specific changes to the form. The board is not going to take up specific line items on the form today. That process will be part of the pilot program. So I think that's my comments. Oh, the other thing is, and Denise, I would like your take on this, but some people ask about whether this could be applied to existing EAWs in the works. And my understanding, I am not a lawyer, but as with most ordinances, laws, policies passed, they, for the most part, are usually not rear looking. And that is a important piece here, that this is really the going forward portion of the EAW. But I'm going to turn to Denise just to make sure that I have my understanding of that correct.
Madam Chair, you are correct. In fact, according to the rules, if a project has undergone environmental review and all approvals have been issued, that project is exempt from future review. And so there wouldn't be a mechanism to retroactively apply these projects. There could be circumstances where a project proposer has submitted their data submittal and that has been approved. And it would be up to the RGU and the project proposer whether they felt it made sense to include these additional elements before it went to public notice. Again, this is a voluntary action, and the fact that we have this pilot program doesn't preclude anyone from using this information. The RGU has discretion, even now, for what information is needed on the EAW form. So they already have the flexibility to ask for the information. What the new form does is provide clarity and certainty for what that assessment might look like. And so I think that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. I see that Board Member Stroman has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow on a couple of the items that you covered in response to public comment. And one is just with respect to a specific suggestion that was made to an item on the form, and you noted we're not going to be making specific changes to the form. But I actually do think that concept that Ms. Voss was talking about of identifying a variety of options for mitigation and then explaining why the one selected was the preferred option, I believe that is in the question 18, is it 18B? Denise can probably confirm that, but it does ask for a description of any mitigation considered to reduce the projects and then greenhouse gas emissions, and then explain why the selected mitigation measure was the preferred. So hopefully that covers the comment in a way where we don't have to amend the form. And then I think to your point, obviously we will learn more about that as we use it. I think the other thing I really appreciate you emphasizing is the pilot is not a study comment, because that's something as I've looked at this and as I thought about this path that we're on being a really good path, it is implementation. A pilot is implementation. It is just a subset, and at a scale that is not full scale. And frankly, I think obviously DNR will be a participant in this as an entity that acts as an RGU. And I think I will learn, and as a board member here, will have some experience to be able to share with others as we go through this. So I will say I'm looking forward to learning, and I think it is really important to note that we are implementing, because many of us will be incorporating this, and those who want to volunteer then, and obviously those who will come forward potentially in the future. But I think that was a very important distinction that you made.
Thank you. I have two more hands up on the board before we move to action on the resolution. So hopefully your comments are either clarifying public comments or asking staff a question related to public comment. I also want to note for the record that Commissioner Malcolm has joined us, as has Brian Murdoch. Board Member Murdoch. All right, I'm going to call on Board Member Heidi Tollefson next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd like to speak briefly to Mr. Madison's comments, and I would like to make sure that he has seen that item 14, which I've given staff comments regarding item 14, now includes one of the additions under D, now includes the word ecosystems. So I want to make sure that he sees that, and that I do see my practical experience on the ground at the township and county level is that there are a number of land use decisions that may affect essential ecosystem services. And I also see, and so I would ask staff, I would again note to to staff and the team that the consideration of direct ecosystem impacts that relate to item 14 continue to be considered with mitigations. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I'm going to call on Board Member Conor Steenberg next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on Commissioner Stroman's comments regarding item 18B and the comments that were made by Ms. Voss regarding mitigation. I guess I have a question or a clarification perhaps to seek from Denise Wilson, which is just looking at that the first item under 18B, it says describe any mitigation considered to reduce the project's greenhouse gas emissions. And I guess my question would be, would you anticipate, or would it be an appropriate response if a entity completing this simply said we didn't consider any mitigations?
So Ms. Wilson.
Madam Chair, Board Member Conor Steenberg, yes, that is an appropriate response. If no other methods were considered, then it would be a matter of transparency that it wasn't considered, and that could go and inform, the RGU ultimately has the discretion for what information is included on the EIW form. So if a project proposer were to come forward with that information and an RGU felt that should be expanded, they could be directed to go back and consider additional types of mitigation. And but there would be no requirement that they go out and do that additional work. And I would add that the way that the language is included on the form allows for disclosure and transparency, but doesn't prompt the project proposer or the RGU to go and do research on all of the types of mitigation that could be possible for the project. But it's really about disclosure and transparency of the project that they're proposing. And that's consistent with the way the form is implemented throughout the document.
Board Member Conor Steenberg, do you want to follow up, or is that okay? And then Board Member Forsberg has a question. I also want to note that Commissioner Grove has joined the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to make 3 points, really. This is a substantial expansion of the EAW. With the revised form, the worksheet is actually 22 pages long, and probably longer with the explanation that would go along with it. The guidance is 30 pages. So it is a substantial expansion, and I would hope if we move to a pilot that we keep simplicity in mind as a goal and objectivity as a goal. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a special challenge for the smaller RGUs in greater Minnesota. So I'm hoping we can find a way to get some volunteers in greater Minnesota. And then following up with several people, the tools for calculating greenhouse gas, if we go ahead with this, is very important so that we have consistency around the state. And so that for the sake of efficiency, to help the RGUs and the project proposers develop these complex calculations, and then also for liability reasons. One RGU saying this is the way to calculate it, if they're challenged in court, which is likely to happen, if it's their own process, they're extremely exposed. If it's a state mandated or state guidance, they're in a much better situation. So thank you.
So I'm going to take that a little bit, that was some of the things you might say before voting. Board Member Forsberg, a little less clarification, a little more comment. So I think, members of the board, we are at the point where I would like someone to move the proposed resolution before us. Somebody's got to come off mute here. I see Commissioner Stroman working hard at coming off mute.
I was trying to come off mute, Madam Chair, and I was trying to simultaneously flip to my window that has the resolution. But I would move the resolution. Let me just find the title. Approving a pilot program for evaluating the draft environmental assessment worksheet form that includes items for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment, as well as climate adaptation and resiliency information. Madam Chair, I think you're on mute.
We need a second on that motion.
Second. Second. Van
All
Amberg.
right. Jerry Van Amberg seconds the motion. The motion is now before the board, and now would be the time to, if there is going to be any amendment, or if then after that process, we will move to general comments. I also see that board member Nick Martin has joined us as well. Thank you for being here today. All right, board member Conor Steenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was happy to see in Ms. Wilson's presentation that the intention here really is that at the conclusion of the pilot in September of 2022, that no later than December 2022, the results will be presented to the board, and a final revised EAW form will be presented to the board. Just to make that crystal clear, I would like to propose an amendment to the part of the resolution that is called the resolution. And I wanted to keep this as simple and as neat as possible. The part of our packet that reads the board resolves to, at the end of that language where it says the last language there being resiliency information, I would propose to add the following: and report the results of the pilot program and provide a revised EAW form for board approval no later than December 2022.
May I amend your amendment?
I'd be interested to hear what that amendment would sound like, Madam Chair.
I think that has to be consideration by the board, not necessarily. You're predisposing approval by using the word approval.
For understood. For consideration of board approval no later than December 2022.
I would prefer you take approval out and have just consideration.
The concern I would have is that consideration in this context might lead to no action at all. So I guess, Madam Chair, I'd be interested to know your thoughts about why consideration would be more effective in this context than simply a consideration for approval.
How about consideration for action or action? I think there's a problem with using approval. I'll be honest. I think that word is problematic. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that would not be, but I'm certainly willing to take other people's opinions. Could someone bring up the wording and as amended on the screen? We need that to be able to read it.
If I'm able to share, I'll give it a shot. Folks able to see that document?
It's pretty small for me, but I have old eyes.
Let me see if I can make it larger. Is that better?
Getting better.
Madam Chair, this is Peter Tester. Can I ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, Board Member Tester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm more inclined to agree with your, Madam Chair's, use the word consideration, because we don't know the results of the pilot program to begin with. And conceivably, the pilot program would need to have modifications. It could be a failure, it could be a resounding success, and we want to move, but taking in some flexibility for the outcome of that program, I think is something that is judicious. And so not having approval, because that not only is outcome determinative, but we may need to do some or want to consider some additional changes as a result of that. So I would be in favor of considering the staff's report on the results.
Or board action no later than December 2022. I think action would indicate a vote.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Board Member Van Amberg.
I concur with your with your idea, I don't think approval is probably appropriate here, but could determination be used?
Determination or action would
Yeah,
indicate
either one.
some sort of actual, I, I tend to prefer action, but I'm open to other ideas here. I do think approval is problematic. It predisposes the idea of what the board is going to do. And I think from, I am not a lawyer, some of you are. I think it's a problematic word in this resolution.
Can I say something quickly, Chair?
Yes, board member Yawiki.
Yeah, no, I would just agree with your assessment of action, and that would potentially address the citizen members' concerns regarding not doing anything or not taking action upon receiving the results of the pilot program.
So board member Koner Steenberg, you've heard from a few of your other colleagues as well here on the board. Are you open? I see you are open to action. So would you like to read the revised amendment then?
Sure. So my motion is to amend the resolution component. The board resolves to by adding after resiliency information the following language, and report the results of the pilot program and provide a revised EAW form for board action no later than December 2022. Period.
All right, and I see a lot of hands up. I kind of need an indication if you want to speak to the amendment. We will, if you don't want to speak to the amendment, if you could take your hand down for temporarily, I will call on people to make comments before we vote. So then in that case, I see, and you can I'll pause. Since we've been in the thick of it, I think board member Koner Steenberg's hands up because he's doing this. Commissioner Stroman, do you have more to say?
No, I apologize. That was just me failing to notice my hand was still up. I will.
Okay, and board member Martin, to the amendment to the resolution.
Thank you, Chair Kelleher. I do want to ask first a clarifying question of member Koner Steenberg, and then I do also want to kind of make a statement why I think this amendment is a good idea. Member Koner Steenberg, what do you think about the idea of making explicit a revised EAW form, including or addressing climate impacts and GHG quantification, to highlight those two aspects that the new EAW form will include both of those things? Obviously, the draft form does, but you've chosen not to include that in the amendment. I just wonder if you could speak to that.
Board member Steenberg.
Madam Chair, member Martin, on sort of reflecting on this language, the concern I had was that if the amendment were that specific, it might have some of the unintended consequences that I think Commissioner Tester was referring to, that we might in a sense be limiting what that language might end up doing to just those specific categories. I think my hope was that by drafting it in this way, it was clear that the revised EAW form was really a reflection of everything learned as a result of the pilot project, and so might be more embracing more rather than being limited in that sense. I hope that explanation makes sense, Member Martin.
So your concern is really locking in that it would only address those two things when it might address more than a concern that the revised form would at minimum require projects to address those two categories.
Madam Chair, Member
Yes.
Martin, that's an accurate reflection of my thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So to the resolution as amended, the board resolves to direct staff to implement a pilot program from January 2022 through September 2022 to evaluate the use of revised draft EAW form that includes items for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment, as well as climate adaptation and resiliency information and report the results of the pilot program. This is the amendment, the results of the pilot program, and provide a revised EAW form for board action no later than December 2022. Okay. And that is the amended motion before us. Oh, board member Heidi Tollefson to the amendment.
No, thank you. I do have a comment, but it's not to this particular amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you could wait then,
Thanks.
since this is
Okay.
the item before us right now, I am going to ask, I don't know, is Faith going to call the roll, or is Katie going to call the roll? Director Pratt?
I can call the roll, Madam Chair.
Okay, we are now voting on the amendment to the staff drafted resolution.
Madam Chair, do we have a second to that motion?
Yes, that
Okay.
happened. I don't think that we need a second to the amendment, but I guess, okay, I see what you're saying. Let's take a second to the amendment, to the motion to
second
amend.
the amendment.
Hold on, who was that?
That was board member Iwaki.
So you are seconding the amendment of board member Conor Steenberg. So it's
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right, so properly informed before us, everyone, we are now going to call the roll on the amendment to see if we adopt it into the underlying amendment.
Great, and board members, you can vote aye, nay, or abstain on this roll call vote. So Anderson Kelleher.
Aye.
Arnold is not present. Heidi Tollefson.
Aye.
Forsberg.
Aye.
Gehring, I believe board member Gehring had to jump off.
Excused.
Okay. Grove.
Aye.
Conor Steenberg.
Aye.
Malcolm.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Murdoch. Murdoch.
Katie, why don't you come back to him? Oh, there he comes off mute. I can see that. Board member Murdoch.
We can
Can
come
you hear
back.
me now?
Yes.
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Aye.
Was that an aye?
Yes.
Thank you.
Peterson.
Aye.
Roberts Davis.
Aye.
Stroman.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
And Amberg.
Aye.
Yawaki.
Aye.
Have all members who desire to vote voted? I believe that was 14 ayes, no nays. The amendment is adopted. The resolution is now before us as amended. So now, if board members would like to make comment, do raise your hand again so that we can orderly call on board members one at a time. So I'm going to call on board member Heidi Tollefson first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that I'm respecting and understanding that you are not taking a motion on Amelia and Sam's recommendation that we more directly address the consideration of additional mitigations. But I do want to make the point that I think we all understand that meeting the challenges of climate change is going to require beyond mitigation as usual. And so my question to you and to staff is, if there is not going to be an opportunity for the board to weigh in on language that will eventually be be part of the new environmental review, how would we bring this question forward for discussion and consideration by the board?
So board member Heidi Tollefson, I believe that, and I spoke about this earlier, we are going to have some type of either subcommittee of ERIS who is going to be the board link working on these issues. And if you desire to be on that, I please notify Director Pratt or me. This is action that we would probably take at the next board meeting to set that up. And that will be both a way for the board to give direct input and feedback, and also that feedback loop to the board directly. I want to just say what this is and what it isn't. It is not a distrust of staff in any way, but I think with such a monumental discussion going on, we really need to have board level involvement in it. And so that is my intention as the chair, is to appoint a subcommittee of the ERIS subcommittee. It's a little awkward. There's a lot of members on ERIS, and I don't think they all have to be on that particular committee, but that would report up through them, and we would also report to the board. I'm open to changing that, but I guess the main point is, yes, there's going to be opportunity for the board to be involved. And the motion before us is really the resolution on the implementation of the pilot program. It's not on the specific words in the form today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I greatly appreciate the clarification of your intentions for procedure. I will be off the board by then, so thank you for the invitation, but I won't be part of that. And I will have to rest with the assurance that this will be something that the board will be able to further discuss and consider, because I think it is necessary to consider the broadest support for mitigation efforts to our RGUs and to our proposers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Board Member Martin.
Thank you, Chair Anderson Kelleher. I wanted to say a little bit why this has been a tremendous learning experience for me as I learned about this process over the last several months, and I realized some staff and others have been working on it for a lot longer than that. And I wanted to step back just a little bit and say how I came around to both feeling that the pilot program, rather than immediate implementation in January 22, is a good idea. And then secondly, why I supported the idea of this amendment. And so to the first point, I feel that, through this process, we've heard a lot of great perspectives from people on all sides of this issue. We've heard about the climate emergency and the urgency to act quickly and aggressively. I agree with that. We've heard that the climate emergency is disproportionately affecting marginalized people, and I agree with that. And folks have talked to us about the IPCC report, about the how far behind the state of Minnesota is on its greenhouse gas goals. I think all those things point toward needing to incorporate this kind of information into environmental reviews. And in addition, two other things to consider, that kind of information can help projects consider what climate impacts might be, and they might make changes to their projects. That's a benefit. And finally, a lot of folks have talked to us about how these requirements are already in law. And so leaving RGUs without guidance leaves them in a fairly vulnerable position legally. So all of those considerations weigh on the side, I think, of moving to include this kind of, and require eventually all projects to address climate information, both the climate impacts and the greenhouse gas quantification. On the other hand, I think we've heard a lot of legitimate concerns about costs and burden, and those, as someone in the business community, those really resonate with me as well. Particularly thinking about smaller businesses, county governments that don't have a lot of staff to do these things. I've had, the chance in my career to work quite a bit on both looking at the climate models and trying to figure out what impacts of climate might be in a particular area, and to do these carbon footprint type of analyses. And I do think that this is not a trivial amount of work. I mean, I think that the staff and the interagency climate technical team has done a great job of assembling a lot of tools, and that's valuable. And I do think actually knowing how to use tools and create a defensible and a defensible sort of prediction of how climate change may impact a particular area, which really requires downscaling of the climate models, right? That's not a trivial thing. And so considering those two things together has really convinced me that a pilot project is really the right way forward, because a pilot project, as you said, Chair Anderson Kelleher, is a way to learn how to do this right and to, are those fears about costs? Hopefully those are not proven out. Maybe they will be. Maybe there's tweaks that we can make to the EAW form. Maybe there's additional tools we can provide to help address some of those things. And I think a pilot project is a perfect way to learn and make those improvements. So that's how I came to the feeling that a pilot project, as long as you said, as long as it's not delay, it's actually a learning opportunity, it's an implementation opportunity, is the right way to go versus full implementation immediately. But I do also want to say that the reason that I liked the amendment that Member Kohler-Steenberg brought forward is it makes very clear what you've said, that this is not something that we'll sort of study for 9 months and then maybe decide not to do anything. And so I realize we can't bind the future decision of the EQB in December 22. But I do think what that amendment does is make clear that the goal of the pilot program is to learn how to do this well, and then to take action on the idea of requiring this information in these forms. We've heard a lot of folks talk to us about how important they feel that is, and I agree with that perspective. So that's how I sort of came around to both of these decisions. Thank you.
I appreciate your perspective. I'm going to ask Commissioner Grove. I think he would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody, and appreciate the chance to share some thoughts on this. I do think a pilot makes a lot of sense. I'll just give the context here at Deed as we see this moment in our economy. It is a really important time to make sure that we are growing in the right way, and I think making sure that the businesses that come and grow and expand here are thinking about the climate and environmental impacts of their growth is critical, and government having the right ways to do that is very important. I will say that, in a really unique inflection point in America's economy, the competition for drawing new businesses to come and grow here or drawing existing businesses to expand is incredibly fierce. And COVID and the pandemic really highlighted the ability of companies to have a ton of choice in where they put down roots. They can pull labor from more disparate locations. They can look at new innovative business models. It's just a really unique and transitional time in our economy. So I do think a pilot is really prudent. We need to see exactly how this will work, whether it will be effective, what kind of effect it will have on potential business partners' ability to grow here. We need to get this moment right for our state, for our workers, for the opportunity that's here. And a pilot gives us a chance to do that and see how it works. We're really committed to getting this right here at Deed, and we really want to do it right by Minnesota, as we're going to be competing very fiercely with not only neighboring states, but even other countries on opportunities to have companies come here and grow. So I think a pilot gives us that chance to learn. It is a real thing. I mean, we're actually going to do this in a piloted way. Doing it fully and just making it how we operate moving forward, I think would be way too fast. We need to just be, I think, careful about how we progress here. But I'm firmly in favor of a pilot and think it's a really wise first step here. And we're going to learn a lot. Pilots are great because they teach us stuff that we really wouldn't have known until we tried it. So I appreciate that perspective, and that's where my head's at on this vote.
Thank you for your comments. Board Member Forsberg.
Yes, I'm not going to bore everyone by repeating my premature comments earlier, but I think I will vote for this because I think the pilot's important, and I'm doing it on faith that the board will be involved in discussions on revising the EAW form with what we learned from the pilot project, and also with the goal of making it simpler and more objective and something that our GUs, especially in rural Minnesota, can work with, and our project proposers, our developers, can work with. And if I could for just a minute, put on my county engineer's hat and say, we're going to pave an existing bicycle trail, and it's above, I forget if it's 5 or 10 mile category. We would, with this form, be required to spend weeks, if not months, and thousands of dollars doing greenhouse gas calculations and developing this 23-page EAW form. So I'm hoping for a simpler, more efficient way as we move through this pilot and redevelopment phase.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Stroman.
Thank you, Madam. I just wanted to briefly add a couple comments. I know in response to some of the public comments, I alluded to your wise distinction between a pilot and a study. And I think just to emphasize a little bit more on that point, you know, personally, I feel we need to get to implementation right away. I think that's incredibly important, but we're also not here just to check a box and say that we, you know, changed some words in a form and have, you know, finished that task. And so I think the pilot is a really important way to balance that immediate implementation at a certain scale, but with the desire to make sure we are getting this right and to make sure that the changes we are making actually achieve what we hope they will achieve and get us the right information. And so I think this is an appropriate and good way to move forward. And I definitely, as the chair of the ERAS subcommittee, look forward to digging in as we start that pilot. And as we're able to learn, and I think particularly, I appreciate the additional discussion on that particular question about mitigation. And I do think, you know, the issue is there, and we will see how people choose to respond to that question. And it's, you know, something that we will learn. If we aren't getting the outcome we hope to get from that, just like other parts of this, that's something we're going to learn through the pilot and adapt. So I'm looking forward to that, and I look forward to supporting this moving forward.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Peterson.
Well, I just echo the importance of what a true pilot is, or looking at a pilot program, and I appreciate that. And I think that, you know, as we go forward, I just want to reiterate the concerns that, you know, I've had as I've looked at some of this and visited with different parties, is that, you know, I do have concerns about the mitigation piece of this and proposers that will be working with us in the next year. And so I think it's just really important that we take those into consideration and really look at and you know, in the understand the urgency and the swiftness to move forward, but also making sure that we are doing it in a manner that you know, as we're taking in and considering all the different information that we're getting in a really changing environment and things that we're learning very quickly. And so I think a lot of times there's a real focus on things that are contributing, and I, you know, continue to just look at the mitigation and all the different things that are coming about with that. And so supportive of a pilot, but, you know, we'll look forward to revisiting this as it continues to move forward.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to check one thing. I think that board member Martin might be just having a little technical issue. The hand keeps going up and coming down, coming up, going down. I think that indicates some sort of technical issue, but I want to be sure, because I certainly don't want to leave you out if you want to make another comment. And I just saw board member Heidi Tollison's hand go up as well. Okay, these all might be sort of technical glitches at this point.
Madam Chair, I'm waiting for Nick. I was waiting for Nick, so I'll wait for you to call on me.
I don't think Nick, so Nick's hand has gone in and out, and I actually don't see him on the list right now. So I think he was having, if I'm reading this right, because his, at the end of his comments, it sort of broke up a bit, and I'm thinking he might be having some technical issues. So I'm hoping he returns, but why don't we go to your comment?
Okay,
Sorry,
I just wanted
Chair
to,
Anderson Kelleher, you're correct.
okay.
The hand just kept coming up and I couldn't stop it, so I apologize for that.
It was a little bit surreal. I'd look over and it's there, and then it's not there, and I'm like, I think I'm seeing that correctly. Okay. Well, thank you for getting back on. And I think I just want to notice everyone, I think we are close to approaching a vote here. We are going to put the language we're voting on back on the screen after Commissioner Heidi Tollefson speaks. And if you want to take the floor, I'm sorry, board member Heidi Tollefson.
Thank you.
Commissioners, board members, it gets very confusing very quickly, doesn't it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say a quick note of thank you and appreciation for the commitment of the agencies that is making this possible, and the commitment of the agencies to both implement, to work forward on implementation. And I think that the pilot will also give the agencies the opportunity to, test the waters and be more efficient about their own technical support. Learn a lot about what it takes to do technical support on this kind of endeavor. So again, I just want to greatly appreciate the commitment of the agencies and the work that you have done and will do on this. Thank you.
Okay, I see Ben Yawaki's hand up.
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
Yes, board member, yes.
Okay. All right, yeah, I just wanted to briefly make a comment. I appreciate all the work. As I believe Nick had, or as member Martin had mentioned with respect to how much work, how long it's taken to see this come to fruition where we're going to be voting on this resolution. The one thing that I'd just like to also note that, while we're looking at this, and it'll definitely be important for us to be plugged in to see the process of this pilot program and to ensure that, we're addressing some of those concerns around evolving science. But also just wanted to just clarify for the entire board that, we still got a lot of work to do around incorporating environmental justice, tribal affairs, and health impact assessments. And so these are things that I look forward to, hitting the ground running and, allowing for our EQB to be multifaceted and be able to address multiple issues at once, because we do have a lot of issues that we as Minnesotans need to address immediately if we want to continue to benefit from the natural resources and the lands and waters and air that we have and that we definitely espouse and tout around as, top quality in all the 50 states. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, board member, for your comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Brian Murdoch.
Hello, board member Murdoch. I
Hi there. I just
recognize
like to
you, and if you would like to make
Thank you.
comments.
I just wanted to point out one thing that I think the pilot program is a good way to evaluate it. I just, as a consultant who's prepared a bunch of EAWs over the years, I think it's important to consider what extensive changes to the form itself does. The beauty of the EAW over the years is allowed RGUs the discretion to focus their projects in a way that addresses the details that need to be discussed and allows them to put aside some of the details that don't need to be discussed. And with this sort of extensive changes to the form, and then just following Ben's comment about adding other things to the form, I think it's a bit of a dangerous precedent to come in and start making this form much more detailed. I'd much rather see a standoff, block guidance and resource center that goes with the form, because you're taking all the discretion away from all these small RGUs by making this form in this step much larger and much more of a monstrosity. And then if we think about adding things in the future, this form will be really quite long if we continue to add to it. So that's one of my main concerns about the pilot study, is that I think that we should also consider the benefits of a form that it allows for discretion and maybe has an attachment for things like greenhouse gas or other types of concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I don't want us to go into a back and forth, though. I'm not sure I heard Board Member Yawaki's comments as additions to EAW, but maybe related issues. I will just say, Board Member Murdoch, from the MnDOT standpoint, we actually are implementing our first health impact assessment on a project. That is a separate process for us. So I think maybe we can work on clarification offline, but that's not how I heard that. And so, but I did hear Board Member Yawaki say there are important constituencies and issues that need to be addressed, and that the EQB has a unique role in being able to focus on those issues. So I might have blended both of those things together. I appreciate both of your comments. I want to mention one other thing that we are aware of, the EQB staff and I have been made aware of, and that is the city of Minneapolis has already said they will go into the pilot. That is an important piece of having a volunteer RGU. I totally respect that that is not a small county or a small city or a small county issue. So we need to work on that. And we have been having conversations. And so I'm hoping we can have very good, robust input as we go forward on this pilot. Members, I am just going to pause for a second. I'm going to read the resolution as drafted, and then I'm going to ask Director Pratt to call the roll. So I'm pausing for just a moment purposefully to make sure we're not missing someone. And then the resolution as now written and amended direct staff to implement a pilot program from January 2022 through September 2022 to evaluate the use of a revised draft EAW form that includes items for greenhouse gas quantification and assessment, as well as climate adaptation and resiliency information, and report the results of the pilot program and provide a revised EAW form for board action no later than December 2022. That is what we are voting on. That has been properly amended. It was moved before us and seconded already. So I think that we are ready to move to a vote.
Anderson Kelleher.
Aye.
Tollefson.
Aye.
Forsberg.
Aye.
Grove.
Aye.
Konar Steenberg.
Aye.
Malcolm.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Murdoch. I'll just give Brian a minute to unmute. Murdoch.
No.
Peterson.
Aye.
Roberts Davis.
Aye.
Stroman.
Aye.
Hester.
Aye.
Van Amberg.
Aye.
Yawaki.
Aye.
Are there any other board members wishing to vote? If not, the resolution as amended passes 13. I have 13, Katie. We're checking our vote here.
Madam Chair, I believe Member Murdoch voted no.
I do have him as a no, but
Both myself and my staff member have 13 or 12, excuse me.
Okay, we
12
will.
yes and 1 no.
12 ayes and 1 nay. The resolution is adopted as amended. Okay. All right. I want to say a special thanks to the staff of the EQB and all of the technical staff who've been working on this issue. I feel like this is a little bit like we told you to run a half marathon and we were going to give you the medal at the end of the half marathon. And now we're telling you we're going to run a full marathon. So we're running a full marathon on this one. We will give you a lot of praise for the work that you're doing already and everything to this point. It's been hugely important in getting the EQB to this point to implement a pilot program. So I just want to say cheers to you. I'm not really sure there's reactions on WebEx the way there are on Teams or Zoom, but I think if we were in the room, we would all be clapping and saying thank you for all of the hard work. Really appreciate it. So I just want to wrap up our meeting here and give folks a little bit of idea of where we are going to. We obviously will continue regular work of the EQB as well. We will be adding an agenda item for an update on the pilot at every meeting. We also, I think it's important that we hear from different, particularly our state agencies, because that's where we can pull from easily. But there are a number of really good things going on, working on a number of the strategic plan items of the EQB that I think would lead to good discussion and might help make other agencies aware of the work that's happening. And so, and other units of government. So one of the things that we'll start to work on, oh, Katie just told me that it's 13-1. I'm just going to say I'm pretty good at vote counting. It's a skill that's really just in my brain. So, okay, it was a 13-1 vote. Thank you. And so look forward to talking with all of you. Some of you I've not been able to talk with yet as board members. I plan on doing that before our next meeting and being on a pretty regular rotation of 2 to 3 months to have at least a check-in with every board member as they're willing to do that. So is there anyone else who wants to say anything else of board members or staff at this point? Director Pratt?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to say a word. And again, you guys know me, I like to give out an appreciation, but I really do think it's warranted in this case. The amount of kind of phone calls and inquiries we've had over the last couple of weeks as board members have asked clarifying questions and just really leaning in. I mean, it's just remarkable the amount of energy and thought and consideration that board members are putting into this. And I would say to members of the public who are on the call and joining us, I know that many of you have followed along, not just today, but throughout this process. And I know how much, as busy people who have lives and jobs, I know how much time and energy that takes. And so really appreciate, your role in this process as well is really important. So we're excited at the staff level to continue working on this. We are, however, going to relax tonight.
Well deserved, everyone. All right, anything else? Otherwise, I would take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion. Al Forsberg.
Board Member Forsberg moves to adjourn the meeting. A second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take Commissioner Stroman seconding that motion. I'm going to break the rule a bit and we are going to voice vote. Please unmute yourself and also give us a thumbs up if you'd like to adjourn, and we're going to call that our adjournment vote. So all those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone want to stay here for a while longer tonight? I don't think so. Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.